Hey, my name's Krista, and I wrote a poem. Want to hear? That's my pitch. Um, I don't know. I'm trying whatever way I can to get people to listen or read or interact with my poetry, particularly this poem, because I'm pretty excited about it. Um, so stay, don't scroll, just stay, listen, take it in, relax. I'll give you a second. Get comfortable. Are you ready? Here we go. It's called The Myth of the Waterkeeper, a modern-day allegory about power, greed, and a return to balance. Long before the rivers carved their way through the land, and before the trees learned the names of the birds who nested upon their branches, the sky and the earth moved together like breath and heart. What rose returned, what fell nourished. There was a steady rhythm that flowed between worlds like water and life. It was a quiet agreement, older than language, deeper than law, the sacred in droplets. And then the sky began to wonder, what if I kept it? What if I held the water a little longer this time? And so it did. It was just a few extra clouds in the sky, nothing too noticeable, and it created longer pauses between rains. But the earth waited patiently. The earth always waits patiently. It trusted the sky. It knew the routine. The sky would eventually release the clouds and rain would fall upon the land. But it didn't. Not this time. So the roots stretched a little deeper, the leaves curled inward, the rivers whispered, but they didn't protest. The fish swam deeper into the middle of lakes as the shoreline pulled back, exposing its rock-filled lake beds, and moss and mud dried in the sun. And once the sky noticed the power it had over the earth, it wanted more. The water kept rising, evaporating from rivers, drying up creeks and streams, withering leaves, pulling sweat from skin, drawing salt from tears, and the sky took it all. It wanted more. Not out of need, but out of control, out of power, out of a craving so deep it forgot where it began. It forgot the rhythm. It forgot the earth. It forgot to look down and witness with empathy because all around it were clouds rising higher and higher, getting heavier and heavier, and dark with depth, layered in shades of storm. And the sky mistook their weight for worth. Below, the earth, the earth began to ache. It began to accept the truth. The sky had forgotten their unspoken agreement. Forsaken, the earth realized it had only itself to rely on. So the roots of the trees stretched farther than they ever had, searching and pleading, but the moisture was gone. Leaves withered into themselves, dried up, and fell back down into the parched earth. The soil cracked open, not in growth, but in grief. The rivers began to vanish. The stones of their beds stayed warm in the sun as moss turned brittle and flaked into dust. Still no rain. But slowly life began to speak up. The bees hummed warnings to the drought-resistant flowers. The pines rustled messages down to their roots. Even the wind carried whispers across the golden grasslands. Something is wrong. The sky has forgotten us. At first, it was only murmurs, but even a murmur can travel far when carried by wind and wing and root. The drought-resistant flowers listened to the bees listened to the trees. The pines sent their message deep underground where mycelium laced the forest floors like a nervous system of knowing. The mushrooms told the moss told the deer raised their heads and told the birds who flew over the hills, landing on rocks to tell the fish. The fish, living in the deepest parts of hidden lakes, broke the surface and sent ripples to the frogs, who read the warnings with their skin, and they began to scream. Life was remembering itself. The animals who once passed each other without notice began to look one another in the eye, or close to it. They were relating. The ones who once moved alone like the fox began to speak to the rabbit, not as predator, not as prey, but as kin. The owl circled above the snake. For the first time, they shared the same silence without worrying what the other would do. The ones who never spoke began to speak, and the ones who always spoke louder. The wolf howled, the coyote yipped, the bear growled, and their message was clear. Water is life. Water is life. Water is life. The voices rose, not in chaos, but in rhythm. 1,000 different vocals holding a single truth. Water is life. Birdsong, growl, howl, hoot, hiss, buzz, chant, all of it rising. The sky began to feel it, not as sound, but as pressure. A pull from below it could no longer ignore. The clouds moved, not from the wind, but from resistance, from memory, from their purpose. The vocals grew louder, the birds flew higher, the roots pulsed underground like drums, and in the energy of it all, in the grief, in the unity, in the power, the living, friction, in the living, friction was born. That was the first crack of thunder, the first flash of lightning. It streaked across the sky with force, with truth, with justice, with the knowing of what it means to be alive. The electric force of collective remembrance shook the sky. The earth had remembered, and in its remembering, it called to life, to water, to itself. It called back home. It said, water, come back to us. We need you. The collective energy was felt by all. It was vibration. It was truth made unbearable to ignore. The sky, bloated with clouds, drunk on power, began to tremble. It had held so much for so long. It had forgotten the weight was never meant to be kept. The clouds could no longer bear the burden. They swelled, strained, cracked. They broke open with the first drops of rain that struck the earth like memory, like apology, like thunder softened by grief. And then the clouds tore open all at once, and everything the sky had clung to came pouring down, not as a gift, not as mercy, but as release, as return, as belonging. The rivers ran again, not with celebration, but with relief. The soil drank, the roots sighed. The moss turned green at the edges, and the animals, the ones who had remembered, the ones who had spoken up, stood still and let the rain wash over them. Not as something to be earned, but as something that was always theirs, their ritual. And from that day on, the earth never gave the sky that much power again. It had trusted once, believed the sky would always release the rain, but now it knew better. Now the earth watched the sky, and the clouds, they no longer let the sky keep them. They say, I am only here temporarily. I am not yours to hold. Because balance is not built on trust alone, but on remembrance, on rhythm, on accountability. And no one, not even the sky, was meant to hold the power of life alone. Thank you for listening.